views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, members, partners, friends, affiliates. We appreciate that you are consistently joining us for New York City Hispanic Chamber of Commerce presents Meetings of the Minds in partnership with BronxNet Television. We have been so uplifted by the amount of members that are willing to share as much resource as possible to make sure that our businesses continue to thrive and continue to grow. Today with us, we are going to be talking about what many may perceive as a scary place to be. Conversation that we kind of tend to run away from because we feel is the end all, but it's not. Today, we are going to be talking about Chapter 11 and bankruptcy. And we have a friend of the chamber, a partner, Mr. Carlos Cuevas, who is also an attorney, to answer some very important questions that we believe may be helpful and definitely resourceful. Hi, Carlos. How are you and how is the family?
Thank you for having me. As you know, we lost Arlene Stringer Cuevas, my stepmother, and that's been a big loss for the family, but thank you for asking.
Yeah, we heard about that. Our deepest condolences and our prayers was definitely with your family. So Carlos, we're here to talk about this uncomfortable thing called Chapter 11. Can you tell us what is Chapter 11 and is Chapter 11 different from bankruptcy?
Okay, thank you for the question. Chapter 11 is as American as apple pie. And think about it. Everyone has been touched by a business that has filed for Chapter 11. If you've flown, if you've taken Delta, American Airlines, or United, they all file for Chapter 11. If you've ever shopped at Neiman Marcus, if you shopped at Sears, they file for Chapter 11. If you've worked out at Gold's Gym has filed for Chapter 11. So one way or another, you've been touched by a business that has filed for Chapter 11. Now, Chapter 11 is a chapter of the Bankruptcy Code. And in Chapter 11, what a company is trying to do is to restructure itself to make it more viable, usually in a difficult business environment such as we have today. And for example, I recently read an article whereby there was a 46% increase last month and the companies that file for Chapter 11.
So we understand that bankruptcy is just a component of Chapter 11. And as you mentioned, so many companies have filed for it. Why do they file for it? What is the benefit?
Okay, there are several benefits. In Chapter 11, if, for example, you have an onerous residential lease or lease for space, you're permitted to reject that. You can't do that outside of bankruptcy. If, for example, your company owes sales taxes, you can enter into a repayment plan over several years. If, for example, you haven't paid your employees' wages and you have a Fair Labor Standards Act by the Department of Labor, you can use Chapter 11 to negotiate a settlement with the Department of Labor. So for example, suppose if you haven't paid your property taxes and there's going to be a property tax sale, you can file for Chapter 11 to stop that property tax sale. So there are different ways in which Chapter 11 helps different types of businesses, but essentially it has one common theme. The company is under financial distress, and what the company is trying to do is restructure its obligations. That way it can become more financially viable.
Tell us how Chapter 11 works for small businesses, non-franchise businesses, such as small mom and pop restaurant, for example. How would that benefit them? Would they even qualify?
Well, that's a good question. Last year, I worked with 2 diners who had financial problems because they had huge judgments from the Department of Labor. I was able to negotiate a settlement with the Department of Labor that enabled the restaurants to stay in business.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, Congress amended the bankruptcy laws to have what's called a subchapter 5, which is particularly designed for small businesses, to enable small businesses to go through the Chapter 11 process more efficiently.
So unconfuse me a little bit. So Chapter 11, is it that these small businesses get money specifically and they can cover some of the expenses? How do they cover employees or stay open and cover rent? What exactly does Chapter 11 provide?
There's a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
When a person thinks of bankruptcy, they think that the business is going out of business, like motels, and that they're liquidating. In Chapter 11, the principal objective is to stay in business.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a company files for Chapter 11, it becomes a debtor in possession, and it continues to operate. It continues to operate under the supervision of the court, and therefore the employees remain employed, the business remains open, and therefore the goal in the Chapter 11 then is to restructure the enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
So what you try to do is negotiate a reduction of the debt.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of paying 100 cents immediately, you pay 50 cents over 5 years to make the obligation affordable.
So you hit on a key word, especially now during COVID, and many businesses are going to be going out of business, unfortunately. You hit on the word restructure.
Yes.
Is Chapter 11 an opportunity? Again, Chapter 11 is an opportunity for them to restructure. Have you dealt with any businesses, and how have they restructured?
Well, for example, I'm currently representing a garage in the Bronx, and we're hoping to restructure its obligations because its profitability has decreased by 90% during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we're in negotiations with the major creditor, and we're trying to obtain concessions whereby the debt will be repaid, but at a lower amount, to enable the company to remain in business and also retain most of its employees. And yes, if you look at the American economy, we've never faced as many daunting challenges. You have the COVID-19 pandemic, which we won't know, which currently we don't know when it's going to end. We also have had 40 million people let go from their jobs. We're looking at double-digit unemployment, and we're looking at tremendous social unrest.
Right. No, you're absolutely, on the money with so much of this information. I mean, we've talked about the benefits of Chapter 11. You made it applicable to small businesses such as a restaurant. Talk to us a little bit about the tax issues or the tax benefits.
Well, if you owe back sales taxes, for example, you're given up to 60 months to repay it. If you owe withholding taxes, you're given up to 60 months to repay it. And you can try and negotiate even longer terms with the government.
When prior to filing for Chapter 11, do you have to have a plan in a new structured plan in place?
Well,
is it an approval process?
Yes. There are 2 ways of doing this. You can either negotiate a settlement with your major creditor and then move to get your case dismissed, or you have a plan that is approved by the court. Now, usually in small businesses, it's 1 or 2 creditors that are calling the shots, and those are the entities that you have to negotiate with. But what you try to do is before you file, you say to yourself, how do I get out?
Mm-hmm.
How can this company succeed in Chapter 11?
Mm-hmm.
Because once you're in, you have to try and get out. So planning for Chapter 11 is like formulating a new business plan.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think it out several steps ahead.
So what would be the first step for a business who's considering this? Do they contact the .gov? Do they contact their accountant when they make the decision?
They contact me.
Okay, they contact you. Yeah.
And we have a long heart-to-heart talk
Mm-hmm.
discussing how they got here, what are the current problems, and what are the prospects.
Mm-hmm.
Because in essence, how do you get out of Iraq once you're in there, right? Once you plan the attack,
Mm-hmm.
how do you leave Iraq?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really plan it out.
So you have to talk to an attorney who understands bankruptcy laws. That's the first step.
Yeah, and it's like going to a heart specialist. You can't go to a general practitioner because it's very complex.
Mm-hmm.
The only area of law that's usually more complex than bankruptcy is tax law.
Mm-hmm. Okay, understood, and very important. Thank you so much for this, Carlos. And one more question before we dismiss. We've been talking a lot about real estate, right? So that's a big topic during COVID. Can a small apartment building benefit from Chapter 11?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us how.
Because you could try to renegotiate the mortgage and extend it out.
Okay.
And by filing for Chapter 11, you automatically stop a pending foreclosure.
That's very
And I've been successful with real estate cases. But again, how do you get out? You have to have an exit plan.
Yeah.
So it has to be well thought out.
And an exit plan is different, obviously, from every business.
Well, think about it. In real estate, either you can cure the mortgage arrear, or you can sell the building in bankruptcy and make a profit. Because suppose if you have a lot of equity and you're afraid that if the property gets sold at foreclosure, you lose the equity. Why not look for someone to buy the building in a bankruptcy and you keep the profits instead of the bank? Is
there a length to a person's staying in bankruptcy? Like, how long do they stay in bankruptcy? When do they end? When does bankruptcy end?
That's a very good question. Sulma, being in bankruptcy is like having emergency surgery. The longer you're on the table, the less likely you are to survive. So a debtor is given 120 days to put forward a plan. So that's why I'm saying it's crucial that you go in there with an exit strategy and that the exit strategy is viable. And that's why I'm saying the pre-planning is more important, because if you have a well-planned case and a solid exit strategy, the case succeeds.
Right. I can itemize the 3 takeaways from here, but if you had 3 takeaways for someone who's just chiming in right now, what are the 3 most important things they need to consider before they file?
1, that it is a viable option. 2, do not wait to the last moment to file, because by then some of your options have been basically taken away. And 3, that there is life after bankruptcy. And that if you look at American Airlines, if you look at Delta, and you look at United, they're still in business. So just because you file for Chapter 11 doesn't mean that you're going to go out of business. It is a means of saving your business. And if you're a small business owner and you executed a personal guarantee, or you're responsible for the taxes, such as sales tax or employee withholding, it is an option that can save you from personal liability.
Right.
because these days it's very difficult to get a business loan without executing a personal guarantee.
This was important information. Again, thank you so much, Carlos, for letting our network understand that Chapter 11 bankruptcy is a lifeline, and it is an option, and it's an important option to restructure.
Yes.
And to give us a fighting chance of survival. It does not mean that it's the end. It may mean that it's an incredible new beginning.
Because Sulma, think about this in terms of the COVID-19 opening guidelines. If you have to decrease your operations by 50%, that means that your operations profitability has also decreased by 50%. So how are you going to pay your pre-existing obligations?
Right. And this is all on a case-by-case basis across all business, which is important for them to contact Carlos Cuevas, also an attorney experienced with bankruptcy, and have that real conversation and analyze their business to see if this is definitely the way to go. Carlos, I appreciate you. I know there's so much more we can talk about on this subject, and I hope that our members and network understand that you are a resource for this. We appreciate you for this.
I greatly appreciate your time, and I'll be glad to speak with any individuals that have financial distress.
Awesome. How do we contact you?
Oh, you can call me at 914-964-7060, or you can email me at ccuevas576@AOL.
Okay, we'll be sure to tag that on for sure. We appreciate you again. Thank you so much for being with us.
Sulma, thank you, and keep up the good work.
You got it. All right.
Thank you.
Buen día.